Oh, welcome back. I've got myself together. We're going to keep reading on a little bit. And I want to say I'm really loving, I've just done my little YouTube searches and whatnots. I'm really loving Ellie Dashwood. She's Britlit 101. She has really just fun things that to think about that like I haven't ever thought of, like when Elizabeth was talking about how she was not a horseman and she preferred to walk, and the Ellie was like, why do you think that is? Of course, the end of the video is like, nobody knows. I don't know. It's just an interesting question. It's good to know what to ask. I don't even know what to ask. Like, I'm just, literature at this point is like, what do you eat? What questions do you even, what do I not even know that I don't know, you know? And the more you know, the more you don't know. So what even is the point? I've got an itchy elbow. I must have got bit last night. A bug bit me in bed. Not bed bugs, but I think a bug did bite me. That's annoying. Okay, so go check out Ellie Dashwood on the YouTubes. I'm sure she's on all other platforms. I'm primarily on YouTube because I'm a millennial. And I tried to get on TikTok, but I did feel like the content that was being served to me felt very like inciting of like these types of people, men suck and da da da. And just as like wanting peace in my life, and like saying a whole entire gender, well, I don't want to get that, a whole entire group of people suck. I just felt like that was kind of counterintuitive to like, peace be with you and also with you, sir. And like, we all need to heal together. And your healing is my healing. And if you don't heal, and I can't heal, and we need to heal together. And TikTok felt very like, I'm sure I just need to get on the peaceful side of TikTok, but I felt very like charged with emotions that I didn't feel like I wanted to own anymore. Or I felt like I didn't want to, like in my real life, it was affecting like relationships in my real life. All the stuff on the internet, which felt very. But back to like men and women, and fortune and marriage. Discourse on men and women with Jane Austen. I'm going to hydrate more for this morning's reading. A lot of letters last time, a lot of letter reading, lots of ideas coming to a close. Wickham, we're done with, and that's fine. And that wasn't love. And poor Jane is brokenhearted, but is seeing the light a little bit on how gross his sister, Mr. Bingley's sister, is being. And yeah, I actually like can't even remember what's going to happen next. So let's keep reading. I mean, in the movie, I'm like, okay, timeline. I know what's going to happen next, but, we're on chapter 27. With no greater events than these in the Longbourn family, and otherwise diversified by the little beyond the walks to Meryton, sometimes dirty and sometimes cold, did January and February pass away. Classic. I mean, it's February right now. I just feel like they're passing away. It makes sense. March. Yeah, let's look toward March. March was to take Elizabeth to Hunsford. She had not at first thought very seriously of going thither, but Charlotte, she soon found, was depending on the plan, and she gradually learned to consider it herself with greater pleasure as well as greater certainty. Oh yes, we're going to go visit Miss Charlotte in Hunsford, where Mr. Collins lives. The parsonage of Lady Catherine de Bourgh. That's right, that's where we're going. She had not at first thought very seriously of going thither, but Charlotte, she soon found, was depending on the plan, and she gradually learned to consider it herself with greater pleasure as well as greater certainty. Absence had decreased her desire of increased. Whoa, I just read the word decreased and it wasn't there. Absence had increased her desire of seeing Charlotte again. Absence makes the heart grow fonder, and weakened to disgust of Mr. Collins. There was novelty in the scheme, and as, with such a mother as and such incompanionable sisters, home could not be faultless. A little change was not unwelcome for its own sake. My mother and my sisters are terrible, and I need to leave, and I think that would be the best for all of us. A little break is nice from everybody. The journey would moreover give her a peep at Jane. I don't know why that made me laugh. Peep! And in short, as the time grew near, she would have been very sorry for any delay. Everything, however, went on smoothly, and was finally settled according to Charlotte's first sketch. I'm going to underline that too. I like that, saying my first sketch of my plan. She was to accompany Sir William and his second daughter, Maria. The improvement of spending a night in London was added in time, and the plan became perfect as the plan became as perfect as a plan could be. Maria is just such a Hispanic word to me, and or Latina word to me. I guess they're close to Spain. I mean, I don't know. Like Maria, I just never have met anybody. I hope this isn't offending anyone, but Charlotte and Mary and Jane and Elizabeth, same Barry. Like, was there Maria just seems, unless her name was Maria? It's just a different name for the Georgian period of, is it though? Let's look it up. Was Maria a common Georgian name? Oh, Mary. We're internationally known versions of the name Mary or Maria. The Virgin Mary. American. Huh. Miriam. Okay. Jane, let's do it. Let's just hit the search with some Jane Austen. Let's just hit the search with that. Authentic Regency named. Interesting. Mariah. Oh, it's Mariah. MA-RY. Can I get a pronunciation? That would be hard, like Regency era pronunciation. I think it's Mariah. I think I'm going to start saying Mariah when I say that name, because Maria just sounds, you remind me of a West Side Story, growing up in Spanish Harlem. You living a life just like a movie star. Oh, Maria. She was to accompany Sir William and his second daughter, Maria. The improvement of spending a night in London was added in time, and the plan became perfect as a plan could be. The only pain was in leaving her father, who would certainly miss her, and who, when it came to the point, so little liked her going, that he told her to write him and almost promised to answer her letter. I almost promise I may or may not answer your letter. That's so cute. The farewell between herself and Mr. Wickham. She even said bye to Mr. Wickham. That's weird. Was he just hanging out at their house? Wow. The sun. He's just hanging out at their house all the time, I guess it sounds like. The farewell between herself and Mr. Wickham was perfectly friendly, on his side even more. He's very friendly to her, even though he's dating some other girl. His present pursuit could not make him forget that Elizabeth had been the first to excite and to deserve his attention, the first to listen to the first to listen and to pity, the first to be admired, and in his manner of bidding her adieu, wishing her every enjoyment, reminding her of what she was to expect in Lady Catherine de Bourgh, and trusting their opinion of her, their opinion of everybody, would be always coincide. There was a solicitude, an interest which she felt must ever attach her to him with a most sincere regard, and she parted from him convinced that, whether married or single, he must always be her model of amiable and pleasing. Interesting. Her fellow travellers the next day were not of a kind to make her think him less agreeable. Her fellow travellers the next day were not of a kind to make her think him less agreeable. Sir William Lucas and his daughter Maria, a good-humoured girl, but as empty-headed as himself. I love it. This empty-headed girl and him and her father had nothing to say that could be worth hearing. Oh my God. And were listened to with about as much delight as the rattle of the chaise. Elizabeth loved absurdities. Me too. But she had known Sir William's too long. He could tell her nothing new of the wonders of his presentation and knighthood. Oh, yeah. And his civilities were worn out like his information. He's like the current, like, uncle that you have to hang out with who's, like, says the same exact dad jokes every time. Where you're like, yeah. And then you say the punchline before he can because you're like, you say this one every time, uncle. It's so funny. Empty-headed. Had nothing to say that could be worth hearing. Cool uncle. He's my cool uncle. You will hear this same story every time you see him, actually. It was a journey of only 24 miles. It took us 32 days. I don't know why I think just everything took longer back then. 24 miles. You could bike that, and horses were fast. And they began it so early as to be in Gracechurch Street by noon. As they drove to Mr. Gardiner's door, Jane was at the drawing-room window watching their arrival. When they entered the passage, she was there to welcome them, and Elizabeth, looking earnestly in her face, was pleased to see it healthy and lovely as ever. She wasn't pale and disgusting from heartbreak. On the stairs were a troop of little boys and girls whose eagerness for their cousin's appearance would not allow them to wait in the drawing-room, and whose shyness, as they had not seen her for 12th month. That's a year. We're going to just say that. I'm not even going to look that up. That's a year for sure. Prevented their coming lower. All was joy and kindness. The day passed most pleasantly away, the morning in bustle and shopping, and the evening at one of the theatres. Elizabeth then contrived to sit by her aunt. Their first object was her sister, and she was more grieved than astonished to hear, in reply to her minute inquiries, that though Jane was always struggled to support her spirits, there were periods of dejection. It was reasonable, however, to hope that they would not continue long. Mrs. Gardiner gave her the particulars also of Miss Bingley's visit to Gracechurch Street, and repeated conversations occurring at different times between Jane and herself, which proved that the former had, from her heart, given up the acquaintance. Yeah, she said, is she really not going to talk and think about them anymore? Mrs. Gardiner then rallied her niece on Wickham's desertion, and complimented her on bearing it all so well. My dear Elizabeth, she added, what sort of girl is Miss King? I should be sorry to think our friend mercenary. Like our friend mercenary? Like a mercenary? Mercenary. Definition. Primary concern with making money. Oh, I was thinking a mercenary which goes after people for money, and this is primarily concerned with making money at the expense of ethics. Oh! Okay, a mercenary. I see. Well, like, kill for money. I see. A mercenary. We cannot think of her, so should be sorry to think our friend mercenary. Pray, my dear aunt, what is the difference in matrimonial affairs between the mercenary and the prudent motive? Matrimony and mercenary are the same. Where does discretion end and avarice begin? Did I already look this word up and I already forgot what it means? No, it's not written down here. Let me just look it up. Avarice. I feel like I maybe have already looked it up, but I forgot. Having shown extreme greed for material wealth or gain. Okay. A whole paragraph with 2 words I had to look up. And talk about empty-headed. Yikes. Where does discretion begin and avarice begin? Extreme greed from you're right. Right! Last Christmas you were afraid of his marrying me because it would be imprudent, and now because he is trying to get a girl with only £10,000, you want to find out that he is a mercenary. You want to find out that he is mercenary. Right! This society doesn't make any sense. If you will only tell me that sort of what sort of girl Miss King is, I shall know what to think. She's a very good kind of girl, I believe. I know no harm of her. But he paid her not the smallest attention till her grandfather's death made her mistress of his fortune. Oh. I didn't realize that. This whole time I was like, well, I was wondering why he went for Miss King, and now I get it. I missed it last time I read it. He paid her not the smallest attention till her grandfather's death made her mistress of his fortune. Wait, how can she be mistress of his fortune, but when the Bennett's dad dies, the house entails, because the house is like the only thing that gives, and he doesn't have any extra fortune. Okay. No, what should he? If it were not allowed for him to gain my affections because I had no money, what occasion could there be for making love to a girl whom he did not care about, and who was equally poor? But there seems an indelicacy in directing his attentions toward her so soon after this event. A man in distressed circumstances has not time for all those elegant decorums which other people may observe. If she does not object to it, why should we? Her not objecting, does not justify him. Right. It only shows her being deficient in something herself, sense or feeling. She's deficient in sense or in feeling. Well, cried Elizabeth, have it as you choose. He shall be mercenary, and she shall be foolish. No, Lizzie, that is what I do not choose. I should be sorry, you know, to think ill of a young man who has lived so long in Derbyshire. Oh, if that is all, I have a very poor opinion of young men who live in Derbyshire. And their intimate friends who live in Hertfordshire are not much better. I'm sick of them all. Thank heaven. I'm going tomorrow where I shall find a man who has not one agreeable quality, who has neither manner nor sense to recommend him. Stupid men are the only ones worth knowing after all. Stupid men are the only ones worth knowing after all. Take care, Lizzie, that speech savours strongly on disappointment. Before they were separated by the conclusion of the play, she had the unexpected happiness of an invitation to accompany her uncle and aunt in a tour of pleasure which they proposed taking in the summer. Ooh, the tour. We have not determined how far it shall carry us, said Mrs. Gardiner, but perhaps to the lakes. These people just had time to make tours. They go on tours of lakes, and they're just going to go on the country and just drive around. These gentlemen and knights, what is there to do? And these ladies who aren't married yet, they're just like, yeah, I'll just be gone all summer, but I'll write to you. Bye. Wow. No scheme could have been more agreeable to Elizabeth, right? And her acceptance of the invitation was most ready and grateful. Oh, my dear aunt, she rapturously cried. What a delight! What felicity! You give me fresh life and vigour. Adieu to disappointment and spleen. Spleen. Jane Austen. Disappointment and spleen. It raises my spleen more than anything. She talks about spleens a lot. Due to what? Due to disappointment and spleen. Loading. This is so funny. This just took me to a yoga page called Fluid Pudding, exhibiting the forlorn look one often sees in vegetarians. Due to disappointment and spleen, Jane Austen. The second 8-week session of my yoga class started up last night, and the teacher pushed me figuratively, obviously, and I hated myself and I loved myself. Then it was a time for Shavasana, and she put the falling music on, and tears dropped out of my face. What does this have to do with Jane Austen? There's a thing about shoes. Speaking of my shoes, tomorrow I'll be arriving, and sometimes I feel weird that new shoes are so invigorating for me. I'm also tired. Who is this woman, Fluid Pudding? Okay, Goodreads. I'm gonna go to Goodreads real quick. Nope, because that's just gonna take me to a quote. What does it mean? Meaning. Spleen meaning in literature. A kind of melancholy found it. The word was coined in the 19th century. Well, before that, Baudelaire used the term spleen to describe a kind of melancholy, profound boredom and overall dissatisfaction, often stemming from the tragedy of life. Oh my God. Whoa. Hold on. Spleen, Jane Austen. No, it's just quoting it. That makes sense, though. Wow. Okay. No scheme to be more agreeable. Disappointment and spleen. That's such a funny term. I can't believe this is a term that people use. Due to disappointment and spleen. It's being underlined. I'm annotating in this book. I'm keeping it. What are young men to rocks and mountains? I love that scene too in the movie, but Mary said it. And then the carriage broke when they were on their tour, and then the man said it again. The uncle said it again. It was really funny. Oh, what hours of transport we shall spend. And when we do return, it shall not be like other travellers, without being able to give one accurate idea of anything. We will know where we have gone. We will collect what we have seen. Lakes, mountains, and rivers shall not be jumbled together in our imagination, nor when we attempt to describe any particular scene will we begin quarrelling about its relative situation. Let our first effusions be less insupportable than those of generality of travelers. Travelers back in the day were like, yeah, we just went. There was a road and there was just like lakes and stuff. And she's like, let's be better than that. Travelers were bad back in the day at, describing. I do feel like I think that when they get to Pemberley, it gets so descriptive. She gets really descriptive in the landscape. And it's really beautiful. And I think that the Keira Knightley movie... The Keira Knightley movie did really good at showing, like, really pretty scenery. And I think the music along with it, too. Ugh. Chapter 28. Every object in the next day's journey was new and interesting to Elizabeth, and her spirits were in a state of enjoyment, for she had seen her sister looking so well as to banish all fear for her health, and the prospect of her northern tour was a constant source of delight. When they left the high road for the lane to Hunsford, every eye was in search of the parsonage, and every turning expected to bring into view the palings of Rosings Park was their boundary on one side. Elizabeth smiled at the recollection of all that she had heard of the inhabitants. At length the parsonage was discernible, the garden sloping to the road, the house standing in it, the green pales and the laurel hedge. Everything declared they were arriving. I declare we are arriving. Mr. Collins and Charlotte appeared at the door, and the carriage stopped at the small gate which led to by a short gravel walk to the house, amidst the nods and smiles of the whole party. In a moment they were all out of the chaise, rejoicing at the sight of each other. Mrs. Collins, welcomed her friend with the liveliest pleasure, and Elizabeth was more and more satisfied with the coming when she found herself so affectionately received. Watch her under the bridge. She saw instantly that her cousin's manners were not altered by his marriage. His formal civility was just what it had been, and he detained her some minutes at the gate to hear and satisfy his inquiries after all her family. They were then, with no other delay at this point than his pointing out the neatness of the entrance, taken into the house, and as soon as they were in the parlour, he welcomed them a second time with ostentatious formality to his humble abode, and punctually repeated all his wife's offers of refreshments. Elizabeth was prepared to see him in his glory, and she could not help him fancying that in displaying the good proportion of the room, its aspect and its furniture, he addressed himself particularly to her, as if wishing to make her feel what she had lost in refusing him. Whoa, peacock a bit, Mr. Collins, he said. Check out the table. What do you think? It's mahogany. What do you think of this delightful fireplace? What do you think of this big, gigantic room? Actually, I was gonna... Don't look at the sign that says Elizabeth room above that door. We're gonna take it down soon. Oh, that's so funny. It says Elizabeth's room over that door, but we're gonna take it down. That was gonna be somebody else's room. Somebody else named Elizabeth. That's funny. But it's crossed out because it used to say Jane. Jane is crossed out, it says Elizabeth, and now it's crossed out and says Charlotte. That would be funny. Okay. Oh, yes, refusing him. But though everything seemed neat and comfortable, she was not able to gratify him by any sigh of repentance, and rather looked with wonder at her friend, that she could have so cheerfully in air such a companion. When Mr. Collins said anything of which his wife might reasonably be ashamed, which certainly was not unseldom, she involuntarily turned her eye on Charlotte. Once or twice she could discern a faint blush, but in general Charlotte wisely did not hear. After sitting long enough to admire every article of furniture in the room, from the sideboard to the fender, to give account of their journey and of all that had happened in London, Mr. Collins invited them to take a stroll in the garden, which was large and well laid out, and to the cultivation of which he attended himself. To work in this garden was one of the most respectable pleasures, and Elizabeth admired the command of countenance with which Charlotte talked of the healthfulness of the exercise, yes, and owned she encouraged it as much as possible, he leading the way through every walk and cross, and scarcely allowing them an interval to utter the praises he asked for. Every view was pointed out with a minuteness which left beauty entirely behind. He could number the fields in every direction, and could tell how many trees there were in the most distant clump. He didn't say, look at this beautiful landscape. He said, there are 22 bushes in that clump there, and there are 3 trees in this direction. Okay. But of all the views which his garden, or which the country or kingdom could boast, none were to be compared with the prospects of Rosings, afforded by an opening in the trees that bordered the park nearly opposite the front of this house. It was a handsome modern building, well situated on rising ground. From his garden Mr. Collins would have led them round his 2 meadows, but the ladies, not having shoes to encounter the remains of the white frost, turned back, and while Sir William accompanied him, Charlotte took her sister and friend over the house, and extremely well pleased, probably to have the opportunity of showing it without her husband's help. Right. It was rather small, but well built and convenient, and everything was fitted up and arranged with a neatness and consistency of which Elizabeth gave Charlotte all the credit. If Mr. Darcy has autism, which we cannot diagnose, then Mr. Collins may or may not have OCD. And maybe a touch of autism himself. But they are fictional characters, and we are not experts on autism, and we are not going to boast that we can do any such thing. But Mr. Collins likes numbers and likes everything neat and tidy. When Mr. Collins could not, when Mr. Collins could be forgotten, there was really an air of great comfort throughout, and by Charlotte's evident enjoyment of it, Elizabeth supposed he must be forgotten. Oh, we can only enjoy it when he's forgotten. She had already learnt that Lady Catherine was still in the country. It was spoken of again while they were at It was talked of again while we were at dinner, when Mr. Collins joining in observed, "Yes, Miss Elizabeth, you will have the honour of seeing Lady Catherine de Bourgh on the ensuing Sunday at church. I need not say you will be delighted with her. She is all affability and condescension." Condescension, attitude, patronizing superiority, disdain. Why does that... rude and patronizing. I feel like they've used that word a lot, and it sounds like it's in a positive manner, and why is that? Why do they say that so much? Lower oneself. Okay, the word condescension, I had to look up condescension, Jane Austen. The word condescension means to lower oneself in social stature, to speak to someone generally considered inferior. Whoa, and Austen fully means it as a way to refer to her as she clearly believes herself above others. Whoa, Austen's usage of the word. Okay. I'd like to learn condescension and African dictionary, both of which imply a negative connotation. Right. This person's thinking the same thing. Where the act of emphasizing one's superiority means important. However, in Pride and Prejudice, Austen used this in quite a different setting. Mr. Collins often uses this as a seemingly positive adjective to describe Lady Catherine, and even in the narrator parts, it is used in a relatively positive light. This is my question. Thank you so much. Out of the several usages, here's an example. Well, we just read an example. The power of display of grandeur of patroness, blah, 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 blah. She is affable. Okay, expert answer. Oh, I see. In this context, the word condescension means to lower oneself in social stature, to speak to someone generally considered inferior. Lady Catherine is, in the modern sense, condescending, and Austen fully means it as a way to refer to her as she clearly believes herself above others. Mr. Collins is a comedic character who buys into her idea that she is above others too, and so regards her highly despite her being an unpleasant woman. To Austen, Lady Catherine is arrogant, but clearly Mr. Collins sees her as gracious because she is willing to interact with people of lower social standing. Oh, I see. Wow. She will totally talk to you, even though you're lower status. I see. And I doubt not, but you will be honored with some portion of her notice when service is over. I have scarcely any hesitation in saying she will include you and my sister Maria in every invitation with which she honors us during your stay. Her behavior to my dear Charlotte is charming. We dine at Rosings twice every week, and we are never allowed to walk home. Her ladyship's carriage is regularly ordered for us. I should say one of her ladyship's carriages, for she has several. I should say one of her ladyship's carriages, for she has several. Lady Catherine is a very respectable, sensible woman indeed, added Charlotte, and most attentive neighbour. She's a most attentive neighbour. She will always tell us if we have a rose petal that needs pruning. That's funny. Very true, my dear. This is exactly what I say. She is the sort of woman whom one cannot regard with too much deference. The evening was spent chiefly in talking over Hertfordshire news and telling again what had already been written, and when it closed, Elizabeth, in the solitude of her chamber, had to meditate upon Charlotte's degree of contentment, to understand her addressing, guiding, and composure in bearing with her husband, and to acknowledge that it was all done very well. Not to say that all people who have OCD or autism are like, ugh, I don't want to mean that at all. I'm just saying that, you know, he just has some tics. I don't want to be offensive. She had also to anticipate how her visit would pass, the quiet tenor of their usual employments, the vexation interruptions of Mr. Collins, and the gaieties of their intercourse with Rosings. A lively imagination soon settled it all. About the middle of the next day, as she was in her room getting ready for a walk, a sudden noise below seemed to speak the whole house in confusion, and after listening a moment, she heard somebody running upstairs in a violent hurry and calling loudly after her. She opened the door and met Maria in the landing place, whose breathless agitation cried out, "Oh, my dear Eliza, pray make haste and come into the dining room, for there is such a sight to be seen. I will not tell you what it is. Make haste and come down this moment." Elizabeth asked questions in vain. Maria would tell her nothing more, and down they ran into the dining room, which fronted the lane, in quest for this wonder. It was two ladies stopping in a low phaeton at the garden gate. "And is this all?" cried Elizabeth. "I expected at least the pigs were got into the garden, and here is nothing but Lady Catherine and her daughter." "Ah, my dear," said Maria, quite shocked at the mistake, "it is not Lady Catherine. The old lady is Mrs. Jenkinson, who lives with them. The other is Miss de Bourgh. Only look at her. She is quite a little creature. Who would have thought that she could be so thin and small? She is abominably rude to keep Charlotte out of doors in all this wind. Why does she not come in?" "Oh, Charlotte says she hardly ever does. It is the greatest of favours when Mr. Bourgh comes in." "I like her appearance," said Elizabeth, struck with other ideas. "She looks sickly and cross." "Yes, she will do for him very well. She will make him a very proper wife." Well, Mr. Collins and Charlotte were both standing at the gate in conversation with the ladies, and Sir William, to Elizabeth's high diversion, was stationary in the doorway, in earnest contemplation of the greatness before him, constantly bowing whenever Mr. Bourgh looked that way. At length there was nothing more to be said. The ladies drove on, and the others returned into the house. Mr. Collins no sooner saw the two girls than he began to congratulate them on the good fortune, which Charlotte explained by letting them know that the whole party was asked to dine at Rosings the next day. I'm confused about who. I like her appearance. She looks sickly and cross. Yes, she will do for him very well. She will make him a proper wife. Oh, Mr. Bourgh. Oh, she's talking about Mr. Darcy and Mr. Bourgh. Is that who she's talking about? Mrs. Jenkinson and Mr. Bourgh. She does look sickly. Okay. Thanks for sticking with me, and happy reading, everyone. Enjoy reading. It will make us not empty-headed. Happy reading.